The community still doesn't fully understand FNAF 2. Listen, we know general beats of the story, but once we get into specifics, that's where things unravel. There's so many conflicting pieces of evidence that even basic story points get contradicted. So it begs the question, what is actually being told to us in FNAF 2? What is the real story?
FREDD'N.
First, to understand FNAF 2, we need to view it through the lens of it being a prequel to FNAF 1. What information does FNAF 1 give us that going back in time would expand upon? Well, the most notable question was given to us on the very first night of the original game. Phone Guy talks about a free roaming mode that the animatronics go in at night. He mentions how they used to be able to walk around during the day until an event known as the Bite of 87. All Phone Guy says about this event is that someone's frontal lobe was bitten off, and despite that, they lived the encounter up to FNAF 1's events. The final thing this call brings up to take into account is the fact that the animatronic character's method of killing you is by stuffing you inside an animatronic suit. That's really all the FNAF 1 calls have to say that would be of any importance for a prequel to follow up on, but that's not where the information FNAF 1 gives you ends, because the Easter eggs also include information for a prequel to continue. The first and most notable Easter egg is Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy has a 1 in 32,769 chance to appear on any night of the game, and this appearance goes completely unexplained. The only connection we get to Golden Freddy are hallucinations the player sees and the phrase, "It's me," though this phrase's explicit connection to only Golden Freddy is dubious even in the first game, as another Easter egg you can get is the phrase written onto Foxy's out of order sign, along with it appearing on camera 4A, along with occasional crew drawings of crying faces. Again, these both will be expanded upon in FNAF 2, but what else could a prequel talk on that's mentioned in FNAF 1? That's when we get the newspaper clippings. Don't ask why I have them on my wall. The first newspaper we get is titled, "Kids Vanish at Local Pizzeria, Bodies Not Found." It tells us directly that 2 kids were lured into the back room of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza during late-hour operations on June 26th. The perpetrator who lured them wore a mascot suit, though we are not told of what character. We are then told in the next newspaper, 5 children reported missing, suspect convicted. We are told that 5 children are linked to the event an undetermined amount of time after. The bodies are never found, and it is reaffirmed that a cartoon mascot suit is used, though it's still not told to us what character this suit belongs to. You could assume that Golden Freddy is the suit due to its mysterious nature and its repeated line of "It's me," possibly linking it to the suit, though the newspaper seemed to directly counter this. It tells us that there was a 5th missing child, lining up each child with an animatronic we directly see in the game. So this leaves a question. Who was the suit used? Well, maybe FNAF 2 could point us closer to the answer, but we have to finish this newspaper and have 2 more newspapers to go over before we get to that. Finally, this clipping tells us that the suspect of the killing was convicted. Now, what is a conviction? Well, I'm no lawyer, but a conviction is a formal declaration that someone is guilty of a criminal offense made by the verdict of a jury or the decision of a judge in the court of law. I don't know about you, but this is sounding pretty bad for our killer. This means that they went through the judicial process and a jury deemed them guilty of the crime. So our killer is out of the picture, right? Well, the next clipping is titled, "Local Pizzeria Threatened with Shutdown Over Sanitation." We are told that Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria is threatened again with a shutdown over sanitation complaints. Parents tell police that blood and mucus is coming from the animatronic suits. Pair this with the previous clipping telling us that the bodies are missing, it's safe to say we know where they went. The final clipping is titled, "Local Pizzeria Said to Close by Year's End." In this clipping, we are told Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has had a long struggle to stay open. We are told that a tragedy occurred here many years ago that results in a struggle, including a years-long search for a buyer that goes nowhere. All of this results in the location closing by year's end. We also get an ironic quote from the CEO of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He says, "The characters will live on," but he repeats it twice, almost as if there's a double meaning to what he's saying. Could the CEO be our killer? Well, let's keep that in the back of your mind. Now, FNAF 2 gives us an interesting question. Where do these newspapers come from? You might think it's obvious. We are being shown these newspapers in the location we are currently at, so these newspapers are explaining the location we are currently at. Well, these newspapers refer to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The very first thing we learn in FNAF 2 is that the FNAF 2 pizzeria is also named Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, so which newspaper clipping can be connected with which? Well, keep that question in the back of your head while we go over FNAF 2. FNAF 2 starts with a newspaper clipping telling us the newest location, again named Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, the same name as the location mentioned in the FNAF 1 newspaper clippings. But this game immediately turns that notion on its head. The newspaper calls this a grand reopening of a vintage pizzeria and says that this pizzeria is the new face of a location named Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So now we have 3 locations named Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, 2 of which being different eras of the same restaurant. Now, this idea is followed up on in the first phone call of the game. We are welcomed to our new summer job at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, despite the fact that this game is revealed later to take place in the middle of November. This could give the idea that these calls are pre-recorded, though later nights will counter this. We are immediately told about the old location. It is implied that something occurred at this older location for people to have a negative view of the company because of it. Then we are told that this location was left to rot for quite a while. The wording here makes it sound like not only is this location older than 2 years, but also at some point it stopped rotting. Pairing this with the newspaper quote we just read paints an interesting picture for what the FNAF 2 location may be a revamped version of. We are then told about the new high-tech toy animatronics. They have facial recognition, advanced mobility, which explains why they freaking jump at you, and that they are tied to a criminal database that allows them to detect a predator from a mile away. This is going to pose a very interesting question later. Speaking of that question, we are told we are the second guard in the location. The previous guard was moved to the day shift due to concerns of the animatronic characters moving around at night and trying to get into his office. Perhaps, much like how the FNAF 1 supernatural happenings are covered up by technological explanations, maybe the animatronics here have a reason for going after not only the previous guard, but you as well. You are told that the music box is a working solution to this wandering problem, though by bringing up the music box existence, he directly counters the previous statement about the animatronics moving to rooms that have noise in them, because no one but Mangle goes in the music box room, meaning that it's most likely purely supernatural. We also have a spare Freddy costume head to confuse the animatronics into thinking we're one of them. In the next night, we learn about the old characters rotting in parts and service. We learn that these characters come from a previous location and that they started putting new technology into them, which explains why Foxy freaking jumps at you, and also explains their different appearances to the classic animatronics despite being the same as them. They were given some of the technology, but not all of it, and now exists in this ugly middle state, only now being used as spare parts for the toys. He also says they smell. Wonder where that came from. And we learn that Withered Foxy has always been twitchy. In fact, Phone Guy goes on an entire rant about Withered Foxy. Interestingly enough, this is the first night that Withered Golden Freddy becomes active.
Guess you guys aren't ready for that yet. But you kids are gonna love it.
Finally, we learn about the puppet. Phone Guy mentions how it's always been thinking and how he never liked it, implying he has a longer history with it than just the FNAF 2 location. The next call has the Phone Guy explain to us the Mangle, a character originally made to entertain toddlers in a new Kids Cove before being torn apart and left as a take apart and put back together attraction. He then goes on about rumors that may or may not be true that are relating to something happening out there. What that something is something we'll get into later. In Phone Guy's next call, we learn about an ongoing investigation going on in the FNAF 2 location. He says that Fazbear Entertainment Entertainment has no involvement, which is most likely a lie, and continues to say that these things happen. The mention of this event reminds Phone Guy to explicitly tell you not to make eye contact with the characters. He says that they've been acting unusual and aggressive towards staff. They just stare at adults. We know that they've been acting up during the night shift all week, but something during the day shift made it apparent that something is up with the toys. Oh, can't be related to that new day shift guard, right? The Night 5 phone call is where things start to get more weird. Phone Guy tells us that the building is on lockdown and no one is allowed in or out except us, I guess. Phone Guy makes sure to emphasize that this especially includes any previous employees. Can't be related to that new day shift guard, right? Speaking of him, Phone Guy tells us a new position has become open for the day shift. Again, definitely not related to whoever became the day shift guard. He then goes on to mention an original restaurant owner of a location named Fredbear's Family Diner. Now, whether or not this refers to this being the original version of the FNAF 2 location is something we'll get into later. And finally, we have Night 6, possibly the weirdest night the game has to hold. We learn that Jeremy is not supposed to be in the building and was given a memo not to be, and despite that, shows up anyways. Why he does that is not explained to us, but maybe it shows a deeper connection to the building than just being a night shift security guard. But that's not all, because remember that day shift that totally doesn't go vacant due to extremely suspicious means? Well, Jeremy is told to stay close to the animatronics during his day shift, and I'm sure nothing will go wrong, right? Well, something huge is revealed in this call. A spare golden suit in the back was noticeably moved, and they know someone used it. Interesting. When completing the night, you get a final newspaper telling you that the toy animatronics are getting scrapped due to possible malfunctions and that the original characters are being saved for possibly being used in the future. We leave it with a final quote by our elusive CEO, "It's a minor setback. We are confident that we will reopen someday, even if it is with a much smaller budget." Something we see in the future with FNAF 1. Night 7 doesn't have too many things of note other than who you play as. Since Jeremy is busy with the day shift, Fritz Smith takes up the position as the night shift guard. On his first night, he specifically tampers with the Wizards. I wonder if this is referring to anything. Perhaps some of these lingering questions could be answered in our Death Minigames. But before that, make sure you subscribe and like the video, and maybe turn notifications on so you're notified when I make a new theory. When you die each night, you'll have the 1 out of 10 chance to receive one of 4 distinct minigames guiding you through different events in FNAF's story, each accompanied by a sampled speak and spell that spells out a random phrase in the background. The first minigame we get actually doesn't include the speak and spell, and I'll save why I think so for later. The title of the minigame is Foxy Go Go Go, and has us as a classic Foxy from FNAF 1 enter a party room to 5 children cheering. We do this twice before, on the third attempt, we see a purple figure standing outside Pirate's Cove, and when we enter the room, there's 5 dead children. Clearly, this purple man has killed these children, and I don't think it's any coincidence that this lines up with the exact number linked to the Missing Children's Incident, or MCI for short, in the newspaper clippings from FNAF 1. But then, what is this exactly trying to tell us? Why show us that Foxy has seen these children and place so much importance on him over characters like Chica or Bonnie? Well, I think that we are being given a reason for Foxy's mechanic of not being fooled by a Freddy mask. Perhaps he's seen something to give him a reason not to trust people wearing it, and it's no coincidence that this mechanic also involves flashing his eyes with your flashlight, like there's a connection between Foxy and the act of seeing. Perhaps this connects to Golden Freddy appearing on his night as well. The next minigame is titled Take Cake to the Children. In the minigame, we are shown Freddy Fazbear with a cake in his hand going to children in a room, while outside a child is alone. Soon, a purple car shows up, and from it, we see the purple man from the last minigame come out and presumably kill the child outside. It's notable that the child we see seems to bear a striking resemblance to the crying children Easter egg in FNAF 1, though later titles will make it clear that all dead spirits are represented this way. Speaking of later titles, they elaborate directly on this minigame. We are told that this minigame depicts the death of Henry's daughter, presumably Charlotte Emily, outside of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The speak and spell in the background spells the phrase "save him," something that is either retconned or is referring to an unknown character. This minigame also ends in a jump scare by the puppet, confirming that there is a connection between the two, because Charlotte Emily is the puppet. The second to last minigame we have is titled Give Gifts, Give Life. This one is the hardest to really understand. In the minigame, we play as the puppet giving gifts to 4 dead corpses before giving life to them by putting the heads of the animatronics on each of them. Now, what is the act of giving a gift to a dead corpse? Well, the only other reference I can find of puppet giving gifts is in the security logbook. In the book, you can find multiple pages dedicated to coupons used at various points in Fazbear's history, one of which is titled Happiest Day. This coupon says that Happiest Day is puppet giving a gift to a child, a direct callback to this. So we can assume that the give gifts section of this minigame is a Happiest Day, but then we give them life by putting the animatronic heads on their body. This seems to go against the assumption we have about what a Happiest Day is from FNAF 3. In FNAF 3, a minigame titled Happiest Day seemingly releases the spirits of the children from their animatronic bodies. So what is Give Gifts, Give Life then? Well, maybe it's showing us the puppet attempting to give them a happiest day, something that doesn't succeed and thus moves on to at least giving them life in their new animatronic bodies. The minigame's speak and spell spells out the phrase help them, telling us that the puppet's motives aren't malicious of any kind. When the minigame ends, we get a single frame with an extra 5th dead kid and Golden Freddy's jump scare. I take this as Golden Freddy possibly being the reason the first Happiest Day failed, as he wasn't present, and the fact that Golden Freddy doesn't have their mask put on by the puppet seems to imply that Golden Freddy took matters into his own hands. The final minigame is probably the most debated thing to come from this game and has no title. In the minigame, you play as Withered Freddy as he walks around the FNAF 2 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. As he walks, he is guided by the puppet who brings him to its gift box. As Withered Freddy explores the restaurant, he sees dead bodies and bloodstains spread around the location. You can also encounter Golden Freddy and Mangle, who are active on this night. The speak and spell in the background spells the phrase, save them. There's a rare chance for Purple Guy to appear and end the minigame with a simple answer: you can't. Now, what this minigame is showing us is where the video will get complicated. Most fans point to this being a second killing spree committed by our killer in the FNAF 2 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, referring to it as the Dead Children Incident, or DCI, to separate it from the MCI. This would make them the reason the FNAF 2 location closes down, but the idea of the DCI existing is heavily debated, bringing us to our main theories on what is happening in FNAF 2. Foxy Go 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 doesn't have too many theories regarding it. Although some mention the idea of this being a new set of victims, I disagree with that. I think this minigame is showing us the MCI in a Freddy's location with Foxy running out to see the dead children, though why he'd be running into the back room where the children are is up to question. It's important to note that this could relate to Foxy being able to see through the Freddy mask, though I'm not sure how. Take Cake to the Children is also pretty self-explanatory. We are shown Charlotte being killed outside of a Freddy's location and then possessing the puppet. Some may argue that the Freddy we play as is Toy Freddy, and that's where we come to a divide in the community about the exact year Charlotte died. Some theorists argue that she died in 1983 and is likely the first or second victim of Afton, while others argue she died in 1987, with her either being the 6th or 7th victim of Afton by that time. The evidence for this being Toy Freddy is that by comparing the sprites of Freddy, we are shown in these minigames, and when we do that, we can notice that Toy Freddy is represented as looking almost exactly like regular Freddy in Scott's Atari style, throwing the identity of the Cake Bear into question. Under the idea of Charlotte dying in 1987, her death would be the reason for the investigation that eventually leads to the shutdown of this Freddy's location. This also explains Phone Guy's wording on the Night 3 phone call, where he refers to something tragic having occurred out there, which wouldn't line up with what we see in Save Them, where it occurs directly in the restaurant. This would also place Give Gifts Give Life in 1987, marking FNAF 2 as the moment the animatronics actually become possessed, giving the game more importance and making it feel like more of a prequel to the first FNAF. Save Them's explanation is made a lot easier by most who believe this theory. They say that the DCI simply don't exist, and what we are getting is the final conclusion of the minigames that have been solely focused around the MCI and Charlotte Emily. Foxy Go 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 is our chronologically first minigame out of the 4. It doesn't pose a quest like the others do because this is the beginning. There is no one to save until the very end. The next minigame would be Take Cake to the Children. Save Him could refer to Golden Freddy, or as many think, the original gender of the puppet before it was retconned to be Charlotte. You fail at saving him, the puppet, so you move on to the next one. Give gifts, give life. The voice in the background is telling you to help them, so as the puppet, you do. Then Save Them poses the final quest to save the MCI kids, with Withered Freddy walking around a memory of the MCI at the FNAF 2 location. This is supported by the files that refer to the puppet as a phantom, and the way we see the Withereds laid out in Save Them, their poses are directly flipped from Give Gifts, Give Life, almost as if that happened in this very room. However, Charlie87 poses an interesting problem. Remember our day shift guard who is totally William Afton? Well, he complains about the animatronics entering his room during his night shift, and as I previously stated, this goes against their programming and would have to be due to paranormal means, due to there being a room with a music box constantly playing noise, though none of them go to it. This would imply that the animatronics would have to be possessed during William's night shift. This is impossible under Charlie87 because Charlie is required to be there to have the animatronics be clearly possessed from Give Gifts, Give Life. But other games like Midnight Motorist imply Charlie was killed close to closing and that William isn't on duty come midnight, which would mean William would have to be on his day shift to kill Charlie, but William is moved to day shift after his night shift. Not to mention Phone Guy's wording on night 1. We switched him over to the day shift. So, hey, lucky you, right? Jeremy is ironically lucky because of William now being the day shift guard, leaving Jeremy as the new night shift guard to replace him, meaning William has switched for the week you are currently working in. So even without the idea that the animatronics are possessed during William's shift, you would have to explain how William killed Charlotte close to night on your first night and then give gifts, and Save Them would have to occur right before you start working your 12 a.m. shift, which is also impossible because Midnight Motorist shows us that someone is outside of the location telling William he can't be there. So for the sake of the video, I'm going to say that Charlotte died in 1983 and that the DCI do exist. That isn't to say that both of those don't come with their own problems either, mainly the DCI. You see, outside of FNAF 2, the DCI are never mentioned again. This game contains all of the evidence of the DCI existing, and that's what makes so many people keen on saying they don't. FNAF 2 as a game introduces 5 new animatronics to the roster and also introduces 5 new dead kids. It wouldn't be out of the question to assume that these two are correlated, but if the DCI possesses the toys, that poses a whole set of new problems. First of all, the toys are scrapped by the end of the game, and we know from Follow Me that simply destroying an animatronic doesn't free their soul, so in order for the DCI to possess the toys, you would have to assume that at some point in between FNAF 2's location being closed and the toys being scrapped, that there is a happiest day performed on them to remove the DCI souls from the story. While this could technically happen, it is something that we never see and have no knowledge of happening in the Epic Games. So that's where I present two more options for what could have happened to the DCI. Either they don't possess anyone, or a theory I made named Classic Duo. How could the toys act possessed if the souls of the DCI don't possess them? Well, remember on night 2 where Phone Guy talks about the Wizards? Well, he says that after the retrofitting idea failed, they now use the Wizards as parts. Using this idea, you can deduce that the pieces of the Wizards end up in the toy animatronics, meaning that the souls could dual possess the Wizards and toys in FNAF 2, but that still leaves us with the weird decision to introduce 5 new dead kids and not have them involved in the 5 new animatronics, and that's where I bring up the idea of Classic Duo. Taking the same evidence of the toys having pieces of the Wizard's endoskeleton, let's talk about the route where the DCI still possess the toys. Under this idea, both the DCI and a part of the MCI would be in the toys, and then when the toys are scrapped and now combined DCI and MCI metal is put into the Wizards to repair them, we now have the classics being possessed by both the DCI and MCI. That would explain why in Help Wanted, Molten MCI is represented by having an endoskeleton made up of both Endo 01s, the classics, and Endo 02s, the toys. However, this theory seems like a little too much for it to be what Scott was going for, and for the sake of this video, I think it's fair to assume the DCI don't possess anyone, no matter how weird that seems. Which leaves us with one final question. Who are our protagonists? In FNAF 2, we play as Jeremy Fitzgerald and Fritz Smith, but the true identity of these characters is thrown into question. As mentioned before, Jeremy becomes suspicious when we get to night 6. He's working as a night shift guard at a location that's closed down, even though he was given a memo not to come. Why exactly he ignores this memo or didn't get it is unknown. Jeremy is put into further question with the release of the book Ticket to Fun, where we see Mike Schmidt being in possession of not only a FNAF 2 badge, but Jeremy's paycheck as well. So, is Mike Jeremy? No. I think Mike took Jeremy out of the picture. Let's look at what exactly happens to Jeremy on night 6. On night 6, Phone Guy tells him to stay close to the animatronics on a day shift he is moved to for the very next day. We then learn that Jeremy isn't present the next day. This game happens to take place in 1987, the same year as what Phone Guy mentioned in FNAF 1 when talking about the Bite of 87. I think it's safe to assume that Jeremy is the victim of the Bite of 87. This idea is supported by the week before, where we, as Ralph, listen to Jeremy's final shift on our phone right after talking about the Bite of 87. But then, who is Fritz Smith? I believe that it's Michael Afton. Fritz Smith is fired for tampering with specifically the withered animatronics, who are the same exact animatronics Mike gets fired for tampering with years later. We also know that Fritz shares a name with the child who possesses Foxy, much like how Mike is constantly connected with Foxy. Furthermore, FNAF 4's nighttime gameplay is heavily implied to be nightmares dreamt up by Mike after the events of FNAF 1 and 2. This is supported by the layout of the dreams being nearly identical to FNAF 1, except for one thing: Foxy. Foxy hides in a giant square closet in the middle of the room, and you have to flash your light on him several times to get him to disappear. This mechanic is identical to that of FNAF 2's and doesn't appear in FNAF 1, meaning Mike would have to have experienced the night shift of FNAF 2. There are also after-night dreams you can receive leading up to the final night. In the dreams, you are in the perspective of Freddy as the spirits get progressively scarier towards you, almost as if you did something wrong. Eventually, you are eye to eye with the puppet who looks straight in your face. But whose dreams are these? Well, I think that the dreamer is probably William. We know that the animatronics are getting violent to him during his night shift, and just out of frame is the phrase, "It's me," like they want the dreamer to know. Though this being Mike is equally as likely for the same evidence points, minus that Mike is only the guard for that one night at the FNAF 2 location. Also, the puppet's movements seem to match up with FNAF 3's Phantom Puppet, meaning that whoever is the guard at FNAF 3 might have been the dreamer of these, who is probably Mike. And the very last thing we need to go over for FNAF 2 story is the Bite of 87 and finally connecting the newspaper clippings from FNAF 1. First, the bite. Since FNAF 1, the community has debated who was behind the bite of 87 and what animatronic is guilty. With FNAF 2's huge roster, this mystery grows even deeper. So let's go through each of the animatronics and deduce which one of them actually caused the bite. I want to first debunk some common misconceptions about finding a suspect. First of all, Mangle isn't the only animatronic who goes for your head. They all do, making them all equally as likely on jump scare alone. Secondly, the FNAF 2 location didn't close because of the bite. It was already set to close come Jeremy getting his check before his day shift where the bite would occur, meaning that the two events are unrelated and that the bite just didn't help the bad press at all. With that being said, let's get into our suspects. First, we have the toys. Let's go through them from least likely to most likely. First is Balloon Boy. It can't be Balloon Boy or JJ because, look at them. There's no evidence to say their jaws can even move. That also goes for the puppet. Next is Toy Freddy. Toy Freddy really has no evidence pointing towards or against him, but I find it unlikely due to other characters having much more substantial evidence. Toy Bonnie is next, and much like Toy Freddy, really has no evidence. The only thing marking Toy Bonnie as unusual is the appearance of Shadow Bonnie, but that would later be explained as agony happenings that are likely unrelated to the bite and more related to the original MCI kids. Next is Toy Chica. In UCN, Toy Chica has a line about her beak being lodged in your forehead, and that's about it. I think it's pretty unlikely Toy Chica did the bite, as it would more be the peck of 87. Finally, from the toys is Mangle. I'll talk more about the Mangle in the final verdict, but keep him in the back of your mind. Since seemingly none of the toys did it, that leaves us with one more set of suspects in the Wizards. And yes, the Wizards are suspects here too. First of all, they are shown to wander around the restaurant and save them, and the parts and service door is open when we arrive on our shift, likely meaning it's open all day. I'll do the same least likely to most likely order as I did with the toys. First is Withered Bonnie. Come on. Dude doesn't even have a face. Next is Withered Chica. There's really no evidence pointing towards Withered Chica, and also her jaw is broken, so probably not her. Next we have Withered Freddy, and honestly, Withered Freddy has a decent case for him. The weakest connection is the handprint on Freddy's face in FNAF 1. While yes, this is technically a texturing error, the Freddy files and Ultimate Guide directly pointed out as being a confirmed handprint, though the reliableness of the Ultimate Guide is up to question. The strongest connection comes from the week before, where after Ralph encounters Freddy, he wonders what it would be like to miss his frontal lobe, alluding to the idea that Freddy has had an incident before. However, there is a stronger case for our final suspects. Withered Golden Freddy is next on the list and really has the same evidence points as Freddy, but also has some connections through FNAF 4. I won't list them all here because there's a great video by Sam Barr that you should check out. Finally, we have Withered Foxy. Foxy, in my opinion, has the most points connecting him or Mangle to the bite of 87. First of all, the week before calls to him not having bit any kids before, making sure to specify it as if Ralph is directly calling back to an event where Foxy had bitten an adult. Later on in the week before, it heavily alludes to Jeremy Fitzgerald being the victim of the bite of 87 through the phone call you get when you put in the year 87. We also have FNAF 2 in general putting emphasis on Withered Foxy throughout the game, and the Nightmare Foxy teaser in FNAF 4 having the year 87 appear in Foxy's eyes as if it were him who committed the bite. So, out of Withered Foxy and Mangle, who actually did the bite? Well, I think that it was Withered Foxy purely by name. While it's true Mangle was known previously as Funtime Foxy before becoming the Mangle, by the time the bite occurs, the character is known as the Mangle and not Foxy, while Withered Foxy is known as just Foxy in universe, as shown to us when Phone Guy goes on a rant about Withered Foxy. Combine this with the FNAF 4 teaser, and I think everything paints a pretty clear picture as who did the bite. Now, let's go over the newspapers I mentioned all the way back when we were talking about FNAF 1. We can now confidently link 3 of them to the vintage pizzeria that the MCI occurs in, that being the 2 clippings referring directly to the MCI, and the next about the animatronics odor. The animatronics stink due to the bodies, and come FNAF 2, the withered stink, telling us that the odor complaints have already occurred. But the final one is where things get blurry. It talks of the pizzeria closing by year's end, and there having been a year-long search for a buyer. If we were to go under the assumption the MCI occurred in 1985, that would mean that the vintage pizzeria would have to have been closed and reopened as the FNAF 2 location immediately, something that wouldn't make sense based on Phone Guy's comments about the location being vintage, and the location having been left to rot for quite a while. However, if the MCI occurred in 1983, closer to the opening of the first Freddy's, then it would leave time for the location to close and still be considered vintage and being left to rot. It would also make Charlie's death closer to the death of the MCI, or even after it. Then it would explain the grave order we see in Help Wanted 2, where it places Charlie as last. I have an entire video going into the year 1983 being a possible candidate for the MCI here, but since most of the community believes in 1985, I'll try to explain this clipping under that. Under the idea of 1985, this clipping would have to be placed during the events of FNAF 1. It would line up with the FNAF 1 location already having been open, and since it's a revamped version of the FNAF 2 location, which in itself is the MCI location, the MCI would be a tragedy that occurred there many years ago. It would also parallel the final FNAF 2 newspaper, with both papers ending in a quote from the CEO that links directly to the situation you are in. Speaking of that CEO and his identity, I'm really not sure. We can assume it's the same CEO in FNAF 2 and FNAF 1, which means it can't be William due to him being locked out of the building come FNAF 2. How could he be allowed to give a quote if he just had a public trial that leaves him scorned by his own company? So to me, I can't really say who this CEO is. That's just a mystery from the game I can't explain. So I'll leave that one to you. With all that being said, let's finally get into what the story of FNAF 2 actually is. Years before the events of FNAF 2, in 1983, Charlotte Emily is killed outside of Freddy's Pizzeria and possesses the puppet. She then gives life to the MCI kids when they die, allowing them to possess the classics. FNAF 2 then begins with the reopening of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The previous version of this location had been riddled with controversy due to the missing children's incident that led to people having a bad impression of the company. The MCI location was left to rot for quite a while before being turned into the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The company first tries to use the old MCI Freddy's characters as the new characters for this establishment, retrofitting them with new technology that starts to change their original classic designs into the Withereds. However, they realize how ugly they are, and they have a smell that's probably the remains of there being dead children in the suits, and decide to abandon the project altogether and instead build the toy animatronics. Their first night security guard is a man named William Afton. Fresh off of overruling his conviction in a retrial, he's back to take revenge on the company. He poses under a fake name and proceeds to kill 5 kids during his shift, possibly luring them during the day to kill them during his night shift. He doesn't account for, however, the puppet giving life to the classic animatronics left behind from the MCI location being in the back room. After seeing Withered Freddy moving around at night and getting night terrors about the events of the MCI, he decides to complain about the conditions and gets moved to the day shift. To replace William, they hire Jeremy Fitzgerald. By Jeremy's arrival, there are already rumors of a second missing children's incident occurring at the building, which Phone Guy chalks up to people having a bad impression of the company due to the first one. By night 3, rumors have gotten much more substantial, and the company starts to worry, telling employees that the rumors are a completely unrelated event that didn't even happen in the building. But by night 4, the police are starting to get involved. There's an investigation into the building, and with William on the night shift, the animatronics have been acting hostile all day long, leading to the staff noticing. By night 5, the location goes on lockdown. The police have most definitely linked the killings to the previous night shift guard and so don't allow him to be in the building under any circumstances. The building tries to contact the owner of Fredbear's Family Diner, but presumably fails. By night 6, the building is fully closed down. Jeremy isn't even supposed to be at work, but for some reason missed the memo not to come. Freddy's already had a previous birthday reservation made for tomorrow that for some reason they have to uphold, and without a day shift guard, they decide to give Jeremy the job. Maybe they can convince the public to keep the location open if at least this birthday goes all right with no problems. Well, not allowed to enter the building to mess things up, William sends in Michael to tamper with Withered Foxy, activating him during the day and sending him straight to Jeremy, where he bites off his frontal lobe, committing the bite of 87. With the 7th night's night shift guard out of the picture, Michael using a fake name as a reference to not only the bite of 83 he caused, but also the act he just committed, gets hired as the new night shift guard as Fritz Smith. On his night, he is given one job by William to tamper with the animatronics and collect remnant from them. However, only tampering with the toys, he is caught and fired, and with that, this Freddy Fazbear's closes to become the FNAF 1 location in the future. Before you say anything, I left out the Easter egg characters like JJ, Shadow Freddy, Shadow Bonnie, and Endo02 due to them being largely unimportant to the plot of this game, with the shadows especially being a setup for FNAF 3, along with the question of what the golden suit that phone guy mentioned being used also being a setup for FNAF 3. But other than that, this is my interpretation of events from FNAF 2 and how the story of the game goes. What do you think? Did I miss anything? Make sure to tell me in the comments, and I'll see you next time.